Special thanks to Horizon Therapeutics for sponsoring the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast, working tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics' mission at horizontherapeutics.com.
And so I always tell my patients they're my doctors, they're my teachers, and Priya was one of my greatest teachers, and so is Nika and Vanya and Rajan. And as a parent, we always think, somehow we're above our kids or we have to teach them all this stuff. But I really feel like as a parent, I learned so much from my kids. I almost sometimes feel like the tables are turned. I try to teach them, but they teach me a whole lot of stuff.
That's our guest this week, Dr. Anju Usman, a board-certified family practitioner and medical director at True Health Medical Center, providing integrative and biomedical treatments that enhance traditional medical care. Dr. Usman also tragically lost her daughter Priya in 2003 to a peanut allergy. It's a rich, full story that you'll hear on this Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Say hello now to host David Hirsch.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, Fathers Mentoring Fathers of Children with Special Needs, presented by the Special Fathers Network.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we'd be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad.
So now let's hear this fascinating conversation between David Hirsch and Dr. Anju Usman.
I'm thrilled to be talking today with Dr. Anju Usman of Lisle, Illinois, who's the mother of three, a widow, a board-certified family practitioner, as well as medical director at True Health Medical Center, an organization providing integrative and biomedical treatments that enhance traditional medical care, and since 2003. Anju, thank you for taking the time to do a podcast interview for the Special Fathers Network.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to be able to talk to parents out there and dads.
You and your first husband, Pradeep, were married for about 30 years before he died prematurely in 2018. You are the proud parent of four: Priya, 31, Nika, 30, Vanya, 27, and Rajan, 22. Collectively, your girls have been challenged by allergies, asthma, ADD, and juvenile diabetes. Let's start with some background. Where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
Well, people ask me where I'm from, and I tell them I'm a Hoosier. And they kind of look at me with two eyes, and I say I'm from Indiana. But I was born in India, in North India, near the Taj Mahal. And my parents immigrated to this country when I was around 2 years old. So I don't really remember a whole lot about India, but I do remember a lot about Indiana.
Okay, well, there's a little twist on Indiana there. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And my understanding was that when your family immigrated to the U.S., they ended up in Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Yes. My dad came to do his master's degree, and we lived in places like Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Cleveland, Ohio. So I'm quite a Midwesterner. And then he taught at Indiana University in Fort Wayne, which is called Purdue University in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And all his friends call him Professor. So I had that as a chronic thing in my life, my dad being a professor and all my friends taking classes from him.
Oh, that's very funny. Thank you for sharing. So my recollection was he was a sociology professor. And I'm wondering, how did that influence your life?
Well, I don't know if many people took sociology in college, but when you think about sociology, you think about like social aspects of how we're living. And so my dad likes to talk a lot about things like marriage and family and culture. He's traveled all over the world, and religion. And so I think for me, being a daughter of a sociologist opened my mind to all kinds of interesting thoughts and interesting ideas. And I think that helped me be open-minded to interesting thoughts and interesting ideas about medicine as well. Like culturally diverse ideas about medicine.
Okay. So did you know at a young age that you wanted to be a doctor?
Yeah. I don't know if you know much about Indian people, but there's only two options for you when you're growing up. You could be a doctor or you could be an engineer. And I hate to pigeonhole people, but in the 60s when we moved to the United States, there weren't that many Indian people around. And so we assimilated, but my mom and dad, my mom especially, she's like, I want you to be a doctor. And my maternal grandfather was a surgeon in the army in India. And he was a surgeon in World War II and stationed in various places. And she just had this idea that I was going to be a doctor. And I thought, okay, sounds good. But it became passionate. It was my feeling as well.
So does that mean your sister is the engineer in the family?
No, we didn't follow the rules. No, but I remember going to India when I was like 7 years old, and there were like lines of people to see this doctor. And I was in that line to see this one doctor. And when I got to him, he was so nice and so kind. And I thought, after all this time of seeing people and taking care of people, just to still have a smile and connect with somebody, I just thought, I want to be like that.
So from a very early age, okay.
Mm-hmm. From 7, and I'm like, I'm going to be like that. And I'm going to take care of people who are hurting.
So let's go back to your dad, who's still alive. And how would you characterize your relationship with your dad?
My dad's like my best friend. He's always been there for me. He's always encouraged me. I just want to cry thinking about it sometimes. I can't even imagine my life without him. He was a father figure like most fathers are. He's the eldest of 7, and in the Indian culture, the eldest son has like a really special place. The eldest son is supposed to have sons. It's a thing. And my dad had daughters, and so he always was like, well, you're just as good as any boy. And he would, teach me sports and, just want me to be tough. And back then, Little House on the Prairie was like this famous TV show. And he wouldn't even let me watch it because he's like, if you watch Little House on the Prairie, you'll become soft. And I'm like, no, I can watch Little House on the Prairie and still watch sports, Dad. But he's always encouraged me. Sometimes with the culture, there's a little bit of difference because my sister and I had to teach my parents about being American. And my parents had to teach us about being Indian. And there's a little bit of that conflict, but we figured it out. And he's still with me. He's with me right now, today. He's probably my biggest fan and my biggest supporter.
So was there any other takeaways when you think about your relationship with your dad, or perhaps how you've parented, something you've tried to incorporate into your own parenting as a result of the influence your dad had?
I think my dad is very good with boundaries. He's very good at telling us what he expects and what he wants. He's good at giving us direction, but he gives us a little bit of space to make mistakes. And he does it all with a very loving attitude. Again, growing up as a immigrant in the U.S., in India, they have things like arranged marriages. And they didn't want you to date. And, they wanted you to marry in even there now, like in your culture or in your caste or whatever. And I think my mom and dad just kind of were very open-minded, and they trusted my sister and I to make some decisions, and they're always there to kind of say, I call my dad an Indian hippie because of the sociology degree. I want to be like that. Like, I want to be able to set good boundaries for my children and let them know what I think is right or wrong. And sometimes I'm like, I'm your mother. I have a right to tell you what I think, even though you're adults. If I want you to come visit me for Thanksgiving, I have the right to tell you I want you to come visit me for Thanksgiving, and I want you home for Christmas. but, if you don't do that, it's going to be okay.
Well, that's fabulous. So is it safe to say that neither you or your sister had an arranged marriage?
Yes, very safe to say that.
Okay. Well, you made reference to one of your grandfathers, your maternal grandfather, who was a surgeon, served in the Indian Army during World War II. And I'm wondering what your dad's dad did.
I think he was a kind of a free thinker himself. He lived in a very small village outside the Taj Mahal. And we come from a community that's very unique in India, where Hindus and Muslims and Christians live together and intermarry. So when my grandfather was like 13, his dad told him, go to the well and take a shower, because when you come back, you're getting married.
At 13?
At 13. My grandfather didn't come back home. He ran away from home because he didn't want to get married. And so he left and he went to a home of another gentleman that was from their village who took him in and educated him. He went to college and got educated. And my grandfather's name was Kumar Muhammad Usman, which is an extremely Muslim name. You don't get more Muslim than that name. And in the 1930s, he actually converted to Christianity and he became a Methodist minister.
So pretty free thinker, yeah.
Yeah, he married my grandmother who was Hindu. So my grandfather was Muslim, my grandmother was Hindu. They got married, they became Christian, and that's my grandfather.
Okay.
He also traveled the world talking about religion, and but I don't think he ever let go of his kind of Islamic roots.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing. That's very interesting. So my recollection was that you got your medical degree from Indiana University, and then from there you did your residency in family practice at Cook County Hospital, which is sort of a big place with a lot of things going on. So no doubt you had an eye-opening experience there. And then you went into family practice, from what I recall. And I'm wondering, when you first started your career, where did you think you were going? Where did you think you were pointed?
Yeah, so I decided to go to Cook County from Indiana University against most people's advice because I really wanted to take care of the sickest of the sick. I thought if I could take care of the sickest people, then I could take care of anybody. And so I thought I wanted to treat like the people I saw in India, the really sick, needy kind of people. So I thought I would kind of be in that place of taking care of those types of people in the inner city. But I was pregnant with my first daughter during my residency, and I had her during residency. And then I got pregnant with my second daughter towards the end of residency. And my eldest ended up having severe asthma, even as like a 6-month-old. And my peers would say, babies don't get asthma. And I said, she's wheezing. I need to do something. And then she had a severe anaphylactic reaction around 9 months old to egg. And I went down this road of a whole bunch of things with allergies and asthma for her. I just felt like I wasn't getting the support I needed. People didn't believe me when I said that she would eat something and she would wheeze. Or again, it was 91 before Whole Foods and before gluten-free. And so I kind of went on a journey of trying to figure her out. And in the process, I started learning a lot of different things about health. And that kind of took me down a different route than I thought I would be on.
So when you said you were learning things that were not taught in medical school, that's what I think you're referring to. Yeah.
So again, I'm in residency. I'm with other doctors, and I'm talking about food allergies triggering asthma, and everybody's looking at me like I have like 3 heads. She was allergic, to dairy, gluten, soy, legumes, nuts, peanuts, and eggs.
Oh my God.
And before the internet, I had to figure out how to feed the kid. And I went to allergists, and there's no treatment for food allergies. They don't have a treatment for it. And I'm like, there has to be something we can do. I can't, she's just a little baby. She's going to be on steroids for the rest of her life. That's when I started working at a clinic called the Pfeiffer Treatment Center. Not right then, but I had her, and then I had my other daughter, Anika, and Anika had some allergies and asthma as well, and later on went on to develop type 1 diabetes, needed insulin. And then a few years later I had Vanya, and Vanya, every time I would hold Vanya, her eyes would swell, and she would end up in the hospital with infections around her eyes. And we found out that her eyes were very sensitive to chemicals, like even in clothing, like rayon and polyester. And so if I kept her in cotton, she was pretty safe, but every little chemical, from a paint to a perfume, from detergent to dryer sheets, would set off her eyes. And so I just was searching for ways to figure out my kid's immune system. Did a lot of self-teaching on that.
Well, it sounds like the data points that you were working with, your 3 daughters, were very enlightening, right? Because you weren't getting answers from the mainstream, call it medical community, and you had to do some research. This is sort of like pre-internet, or right at the very beginning of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine, there was a lot less information available at people's fingertips. It sounds like that was the change of course from a career standpoint. Was there a point in time where you could say, okay, I've got to do something about this, not just for my own children, but there's a bigger problem out here?
Yeah, so as I started trying to figure out my children, I thought I'd start taking some classes, and I found a class in homeopathy, and then I went to that, and then I met some people from my area, and then they introduced me. It's funny how things happen. They introduced me to this clinic called Pfeiffer Treatment Center in Naperville, Illinois, and they based their work on Carl Pfeiffer's work from the 1970s. And he worked on patients with schizophrenia and ADD and ADHD, and he treated them with what they called orthomolecular medicine at the time, which is high-dose vitamin therapy. And they used various vitamins, and they had different protocols. And so I became their medical director. I was their medical director for 8 years. I did some research on copper-zinc imbalances in patients with ADD, and I started seeing patients with autism spectrum disorders. And because of the research on copper-zinc, we did research on kids with autism and found that 90% of over 500 patients we looked at had high copper and low zinc. And that was also associated with ADD type symptoms. So I kind of got a name in the world of ASD, autism spectrum, regarding this research on copper and zinc. Then in 2003, my daughter Priya, the one I told you about that had a lot of allergies, she passed away from a peanut allergy.
Wow.
Yeah. And, it's hard as a parent because you feel a lot of guilt about stuff. She passed away from eating an egg roll that was laced with a little bit of peanut butter. And we had always eaten at that restaurant, so I felt safe. But that day they had a new chef, and he put peanut butter in the egg roll. And we couldn't save her. And after that, I decided, I really wanted some autonomy. I wanted to treat patients who, really couldn't find a lot of help other places. And so I started my own practice, and that's True Health Medical Center in Naperville. And because of Priya, Nika, and Vanya's sensitivities, I also opened a pharmacy called Pure Compounding Pharmacy. And compounding pharmacies can make stuff that's clean. I know it doesn't have soy. I know it doesn't have corn. I know it doesn't have peanuts or, junk in it. So I can make things like ibuprofen or diphenhydramine or anything I want, and it's clean. That was the impetus.
Well, thank you for sharing the story about Priya. Out of curiosity, how old was she when she passed?
She was 12.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's said that a parent's worst nightmare is losing a child, regardless of the age or what the circumstances are. And I can just tell by the tone of your voice that, that was an earth-shaking experience for you.
Yeah. I I have a lot of patients on the autism spectrum, and the parents, they're waiting for their child to like hug them or say something to them or tell them they love them. And I always kind of feel like a lot of my patients are here physically, but maybe they're kind of somewhere else. And with Priya, she's not here physically, but she is somewhere else. She's still there with me.
Yeah, well, I think that what's clear to me, just having you recount the story, is that it's because of the experience that she's influenced your life. So it'll be a part of you and your family, in eternity.
Yeah.
That it's because of that experience that you pursued the work that you have. And what a great legacy or testimony it is to her. So
she always wanted to be a doctor, and doctor means teacher. And so I always tell my patients, they're my doctors, they're my teachers. And Priya was one of my greatest teachers, and so is Nika and Vanya and Rajan. And as a parent, we always think, like somehow we're above our kids or we have to teach them all this stuff. But I really feel like as a parent, I learned so much from my kids. I learn about myself. I constantly am learning, what to do, what not to do. And I almost sometimes feel like the tables are turned. Like I try to teach them, but they teach me a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah, well, I think that it's emphasizing how open-minded you are, right? And I think that you had referenced the fact that your dad was open-minded, right? So maybe that's part of your family's legacy. And you mentioned that his dad obviously was open-minded, given the trajectory of his life as well. So, it's just coming out in a different way. Remember, you're the oldest son.
Mm-hmm, I am.
Okay. Well, I'm sort of curious to know, before the girls were born and all the things that have transpired that you made reference to, did you really have any exposure to the world of special needs, what we might call special needs?
Not directly. I worked as a nurse's aide in a hospital. I worked as a candy striper in the hospital. I did some volunteer work. My mother worked in a group home. She worked for ARC, and she was a supervisor for ARC, and a lot of her clients had special needs. And so I was exposed to a lot of, children with special needs. And my mom was just so kind and loving. And I sometimes would think, gosh, how does she deal with that all day long? That was my kind of exposure. But I never really thought I would be working in that type of environment.
Was there some meaningful advice that you got as a parent raising these young girls with all these different challenges? Something that sticks out in your mind today?
I don't know if I got specific advice, but again, I think a lot of us model our parents. We model behavior. I think I just had great role models. Maybe just, watching my parents just be so compassionate and kind to everybody from all walks of life, from all religions, from all health perspectives. One of the things that I talk to parents about is, in my patients, I talk to them about presuming competency. I really feel that all my patients, whatever degree of intellectual disabilities they have, cognitive disabilities, language, behavior, I truly think that they understand things more than we may give them credit for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, just as a parent, I think you fundamentally know that your kids are always watching you, right? And they're picking up things at a much earlier age than you might give them credit for.
Yeah.
At least that's what I think I heard you say, and that was my own experience raising our 5 kids. And there's a lot more going on there. And I think when I think about the various conversations I've had with hundreds and hundreds of parents raising kids with special needs, the inclination is to dumb things down and assume that they don't understand or they won't be able to understand. And I think that might be intuitive, but I think we need to be thinking counterintuitively, which is just expect, not unrealistically, but expect the best outcomes. And, that way you're not putting limits on your child and their development. And the main takeaway that I've experienced is that kids will surprise you with what they're capable of.
Yeah.
But they need to be given the space. And it does take, some faith, right? Maybe not blind faith, but it does take some faith to think that there's a greater horizon out there.
Yeah. I think that, like you said, our kids are teaching us a lot of things along the way. And we just have to be mindful of the fact that they're wise. They're wise. My son, Rajan, he's in college right now, but he likes to write poetry. And when their dad died, he's my healthy kid. And so when their dad died, he became very depressed and went through a lot of anxiety, and he started writing poetry. And I encouraged him to put together a book that some of my patients had given me poems over the years that they had written. And most of my patients are nonverbal. So, and if you read these poems or these writings, you're just like, oh my God, it's so deep. Like the thought process, the insight, it's so deep and profound. And if you look at the surface of these people, you would think that there's intellectual disability. There is none. Mm-hmm. And so he put together this book called Writers Without a Voice. I was very proud of him, and that whole concept of underestimating. There's a dad, his name is J.B. Handley. He's a kind of a famous dad in the autism world. He had started a non-for-profit called Generation Rescue, but he came out with a book last year called Underestimated. And again, this particular dad has a lot of resources. He's well known. He financial resources, and his child was quite affected. And he felt like one of the things that he did was underestimate his child. And the book is actually written by his child and him. It's an excellent kind of an eye-opening journey.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. I'll be sure to check it out. It sounds fascinating. And again, I think we're scratching on the surface of what human beings are capable of, particularly those that say might be nonverbal, like you were just referring to. They might be written off as, not able to communicate, maybe don't understand. And I've seen time and time again where individuals, while they might lack a certain skill, it might be the ability to talk, or it might be the lack of vision. It's like their other senses are overcompensating, and they're much stronger. And I think that we need to identify what people's strengths are, as opposed to maybe what their deficits are, right? And define people by what their strengths are versus what they're not able to do. But easy to talk about. I think that it does take an extra level of discipline to look beyond, right, what we might be able to physically experience or see ourselves.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, thinking about your girls and raising them with the various challenges that you've described, were there any supporting organizations that played a role, either directly for their benefit or for the benefit of your family, that come to mind?
Since my daughters had medical conditions, and they're not kind of considered, on the autism spectrum, but I still was involved in various non-for-profits in the autism world. Autism Research Institute, Talk About Curing Autism, and now it's called the Autism Community in Action, NAA, National Autism Association. I found a lot of support in that world for myself so I could help my children. In the world of integrative medicine, it's a little different than traditional medicine in that, I have a closeness with some of my patients and parents, and we support each other. And so again, when we go to these conferences together and we meet each other and we talk and we share, I found a lot of camaraderie and having that network of Autism One and things like that. A lot of my support comes from people in those organizations. And it takes a village. It really does. I mean, it's so isolating when you have a child with issues that nobody else can figure out. And another thing I tell my patients' parents is that they're the world's leading expert on their kid. They need to find that team, the leader or the coach, and then we have our players on that team to take care of this child. And if you try to do it alone, it's just, I don't think you can. I don't really think you can. I think our culture, like that Indian culture versus the American culture, the culture in America is a little bit more isolating, individualistic. It feels lonely.
We'll be back with more of the conversation on the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast in just a few moments. But first, this quick message. Please help 21st century dads gather research on families raising children with special needs by having them complete the Special Fathers Network Early Intervention Parents Survey. A link to the survey can be found in the show notes. As a token of our appreciation, each person, mom or dad, who completes the survey will receive a Great Dad coin. Thank you. Now, back to the conversation.
I'd like to switch gears and talk about True Health Medical Center, which you founded and you're the medical director of since 2003. And from what I remember, the mission of that organization is to use evidence-based integrative medical interventions to help children diagnosed with ADD, autism, allergies, gastronomical issues, and related disorders. And I'm wondering, was that from the very get-go, or has it evolved to that? What was your original vision and what are you doing today?
That was pretty much for the get-go, because the original vision was that people with chronic illnesses, whatever they are, have a lot of things going on in their immune system, their GI system. So by addressing those issues, we can help those other mental symptoms. And so patients with autism spectrum disorders end up coming to see me, patients with ADD. I have some patients with Down syndrome, allergies and such. And again, we kind of approach it all the same way. Clean up the environment, clean up the diet, clean up the gut, do some foundational support. And I think that, we're talking to dads out there, and I find that the patients who do the best at these kinds of, it's a long-term kind of approach to things, it's not a magic pill, are when both parents, obviously it's divide and conquer in families, but when both parents are understanding and on board and support one another and are moving in the same direction, energetically, emotionally, I feel like that my kids who do the best are the kids who have their dads really involved. I really do believe that. And I get so excited when the dads are on the calls and, they send me a message or it just makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, well, the advocacy I've been doing the last 25 years suggests that when both parents are involved, and I always talk about from an educational perspective, when both parents are involved, the educational outcomes go up almost across the board. And a lot of the things that are holding kids and the families back, the drug and alcohol abuse, the teen suicide and pregnancy, the crime and incarceration, the headline news in every community across our country and, around the world for that matter. But when both parents are involved, the outcomes, generally speaking, are better. It's not prophylactic. It's not a guarantee that everything is going to be better. But when you look at the statistics, right, and that's what we're talking about, the evidence, right? If you look at these longitudinal studies, dads do make a difference. We need to step up. We need to lean in, and we need to be engaged to the full extent that we're able to. So thank you for emphasizing that. So is there a story that might be anecdotal in nature but might emphasize the success that you've experienced? Mom and dad come to you with a 10-year-old, whatever the age is, and say, here's the crazy situation we've been dealing with. We're at the end of our rope. We've tried everything. We found you. got a referral to you and that you were the answer to their prayers. Do you have a story that would be representative, something like that?
I have like 5, 6 stories in my head about this, so I'm trying to pick one that you guys would like. But this is an older kid on the autism spectrum. Parents are divorced. Dad is interested in doing something outside of the norm of like antipsychotics and antidepressants, and mom is not quite wanting to do it. But this particular dad went to one of the conferences and he made an appointment, and we got mom to come too, even though they weren't together anymore. And these two have worked together to figure their son out. And even at a later age, I think, he was in his like 15 or 16 when I started seeing him about 5 years ago. He progressed quite a lot with the different therapies. And dad made mom a believer. And now I get like, messages just from mom saying, oh, what should we do with this? And then, and we always make decisions together, even though they're not together as a family unit in the classic sense. I do feel like they are together as a family unit for their child. And their child has really blossomed. And now the child is older, and now he sends me messages and then sends them to the mom and his mom and dad and double checks with them if it's okay. But yeah, they're an incredible family.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. Let's just touch one more time about the Pure Compounding Pharmacy. This is an organization that you'd started, I think it was in 2007. You already made reference to it. And what is it that makes PCP, unique or different? Is it the manufacturing standards? It's the type of compounds? What is it that distinguishes this type of pharmacy from, going to Osco or Walgreens or someplace else?
So a compounding pharmacy basically takes whatever, like a pharmaceutical, even a nutraceutical, and delivers it to you in a clean format. So again, any drug that you get over the counter might have dyes, excipients, other ingredients. And when you have that particular drug compounded, it doesn't have any of those in it. So because my children were so sensitive, they couldn't tolerate a lot of the other stuff in medicines. And my patients are like that too. My patients are extremely sensitive. Compounding pharmacy cannot manufacture. So we don't manufacture anything. We make it on an individual basis for the person. So that's the compounding. But because it's a pharmacy, we do sell regular medications and things like that. So people can come for their blood pressure medicine. And the other thing that's unique to what we do is we can do compounded vitamins. So say I did some blood work on you and found out, oh, you're low in zinc and you're low in D and you have some mitochondrial issues. So you need some carnitine and CoQ10. Instead of having you take like 10 different supplements, I can decide, I want this much vitamin C, E, zinc, carnitine, CoQ10, and put it in a compound. My pharmacy would make it, and then you would get your vitamin prescription. It has its unique qualities.
It sounds more complicated and more expensive. Is that reasonable, or is that just a misnomer?
It's not more expensive in the sense that if you have a whole bunch of vitamins you're buying and you compound them together, that doesn't get much more expensive or more expensive. Sometimes the compounded prescriptions get covered by insurance. And nowadays, copays and some of these prescription meds are so expensive that our compounding pharmacy can even be cheaper for the prescription medications. So it's not always more complicated and more expensive. And I always tell people, call, find out what it is.
Yeah, well, it's good advice. I think I'll take you up on that offer, if I can call it such, because I do take, maybe 9 or 10 different supplements. It's just evolved over a longer period of time, and I don't really have a clear understanding, if it's absolutely necessary. And my way of thinking about it is, even if there's a marginal benefit to the supplements, I'd rather be supplementing than not supplementing, so that, I'm giving my body, my immune system, the advantage of performing at its best ability.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of research out there about how certain things can be helpful for various issues. The only thing with compounding pharmacies, if you get something prescribed, it has to be prescribed by a physician for them to make it. So if your doctor is willing to write down, oh, take this, and send it over to the pharmacy, they'll make it.
Gotcha.
So it is like it's like a regular pharmacy where you need a prescription for things. But the compounding pharmacy that I have also sells supplements, and those are over the counter.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing. Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if there's some advice that you might offer a parent, dad specifically, as it relates to some of the issues that we've been talking about.
You probably say this to all your dads, and I think I heard you say it. It's just dads that are involved and engaged. I hear some of the dads tell me they're paying the bills and they're bringing in the money, so they are not involved in some of the other aspects of the child care. And as a mom who had to work and bring home the money and take care of the kids, I don't see that as a great excuse. And also as a mom that lost a child, I know that feeling of not being able to fix everything, and that's a tough feeling. So we have to do the best we can and be okay with that.
Yeah, well, I think that's very insightful. Thank you for sharing. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
No, I just wanted to thank you for having a mom on your dad's podcast. And I appreciate the dialogue because it helps me to help my patients. And I definitely, will ask my fathers in my practice to listen to you and moms.
Well, thank you.
So thank you.
So let's give a special shout out to our mutual friend, Peter Marisi, for making the introduction.
Yes.
If somebody wants to learn more about True Medical Center, Pure Compounding Pharmacy, or to contact you, what's the best way to do that?
They can go online at truehealthmedical.com, purecompoundingpharmacy.com, and our information is there.
Excellent. I'll be sure to include those in the show notes, so it'll make it as easy as possible for somebody to learn more about the organization, and I assume that they could contact you through one of the websites as well.
Yes.
Anju, thank you for taking the time and many insights. As a reminder, Anju is just one of the individuals who's part of the Special Fathers Network, a mentoring program for fathers raising a child with special needs. If you'd like to be a mentor father or are seeking advice from a mentor father with a similar situation to your own, please go to 21stcenturydads.org. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As you probably know, the 21st Century Dads Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which means we need your help to keep our content free to all concerned. Would you please consider making a tax-deductible contribution? I would really appreciate your support. Anju, thanks again.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children match up with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support other dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we would be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Lastly, we're always looking to share interesting stories. If you'd like to share your story or know of a compelling story, please send an email to david@21stcenturydads.org.
The Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast was produced by me, Tom Couch. Thanks again to Horizon Therapeutics, who believe that science and compassion must work together to transform lives. That's why they work tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics at horizontherapeutics.com.